Welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara. I'm here to welcome you into the world of orgasmic living by hosting experts to discuss orgasmic topics such as nutrition, spirituality, personal development, sexuality, and much more. Here, we will offer lifestyle lessons that can help you lead a fulfilling, joyous, and orgasmic lifestyle. I'm your guide, Venus O'Hara. Welcome to the 49th episode of the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara. In this Strawberry Moon episode, we'll be discussing love and monogamy. I'll be interviewing Molly Apple and Joe Dunn, authors of Wild Monogamy. Then I'll be discussing the book I'm reading now, which is Venus in Furs by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. And finally, we'll be experiencing a guided meditation with affirmations for love. But first, let me share with you some reflections on my own vision of love and relationships. One of the best things about being a podcaster is that I get to speak to the best people who really inspire me, and many people who have what I want, and I find that incredibly inspirational. Another thing that I love is that I don't have to do anything to get guests. I have people queuing up to be on this podcast, which is a wonderful, wonderful situation to be in. I have so many interviews already stacked up in the pile. That sounds a bit bad. So I've actually decided to change the order of publication, and today I'm going to be speaking with Molly and Joe, and they are the authors of Wild Monogamy, and they weren't scheduled for the next show, but I thought I would do them this time because this week has been Love Week. On Monday, I went to see Jay Shetty in Barcelona, and his show was called Rules of Love. It's loosely based on the book 8 Rules of Love, which I've already spoken to you about on this podcast. I've already reviewed the book, and I was very surprised about comparing the show with the book, because I've only just finished chapter 2, and I'm telling you, it's super triggering. And as there are 8 rules of love, I was thinking, it's a pity that I haven't finished the book before the actual event. But I realized that the event was actually very different. The book is more focused on romantic love, whereas the event was about all types of love. It was talking about loneliness, solitude, self-esteem, self-respect, self-care, and then some relationship stuff, obviously, and then couples. He was taking lots of people out of the audience to see how well they knew their partner, different stories of heartbreak, and also family love, friend love. And so there were moments of laughter and many moments of tears. Oh my God, I cried so much in this event. Luckily, my makeup is pretty good because it didn't actually smudge at all, but I wasn't the only one. Many people were triggered by the whole thing. It was very, very, very emotional and very thought-provoking as well. Makes you think about, how important love is in your life, not just romantic love, but, having good friends, good support, and a good emotional basis. And especially what's really important, of course, is self-esteem. And one thing that really surprised me about this whole event is that, to be talking about love and being an expert in it, he wasn't really talking about his own experience. It wasn't based on, I have a relationship, so I'm an expert. Because I do know people who are in that field, and their whole, philosophy is based on, or their whole being or professional life is based on the fact that they've actually manifested a relationship, so it makes them an expert. However, Jay Shetty's show was all about citing psychological studies and science, and it was very, very, very interesting. And it was very, very, very entertaining, and it was about 3 hours long. And we were on almost the front row. I went with some of my goddess friends. We all dressed in red, and then we learned that red is the color for love. Well, I kind of knew that anyway. So that was an experience. And then just last night, I spoke with Molly and Joe, Molly Apple and Joe Dunn, who are the authors of Wild Monogamy, Cultivating Erotic Intimacy to Keep Passion and Desire Alive. I didn't finish that book either, but there are many thought-provoking topics in that book that really focus on how to create a greater connection within a relationship. So both of these books are quite complementary, and I think you can read them if you're single or if you're in a partnership. And it's kind of interesting to kind of get to know the other person. There are many exercises in it as well. And there are many tips about how to push your edges, how to make monogamy spicy. And it doesn't just focus on the author's experience. They also profile many, many, many people because they are also relationship coaches. So that's very, very, very interesting. Anyway, after I spoke to them last night, I was so inspired. And seeing as the theme of my life right now is about love, I'm so interested in the topic. I thought I would change up my publishing, my public schedule for my podcast and fast forward this interview. So last night I wrote on Facebook, on a post on Molly and Joe's Facebook page, I said, "It was so nice to speak with you both. I can't wait to publish it." And they wrote back, "It was lovely. You sure know your stuff around relationships." And I was thinking, me? Seriously? I don't know anything. This is probably the least performing area of my life. It's the area that I've paid least attention to over the years. And there are many reasons behind that. Maybe some of it is about trauma from the past, a lot of fear of losing control, and also maybe a lack of self-esteem, which took me a while to actually admit. Because I always thought of myself as someone who did love themselves, and you know, I do take care of myself, but it's probably not enough. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot. And also, I've also been in the past a bit of a control freak. So I associate the area of relationships with vulnerability, giving up control. And that's just scares the hell out of me. And I've also had some bad experiences in the past when I've been living with people and had those moments of just feeling completely helpless and thinking, I want to leave now, but I can't afford to. And I know lots of people go through that in relationships. I read a statistic that's very scary, saying that 59% of married women would leave if they had to. So I've already been in a situation where I was living with someone and I couldn't afford to leave. So I just said to myself, I'm never doing that again. I'm never putting myself in a vulnerable position like that in a partnership. And I've also thought about relationships as just in the present. I've never thought about them as a future thing. And that's something that it's a big block, because I realized on Monday at this show that I've been missing out on so much because of my own lack of self-esteem, my own barriers, my own boundaries, my own resistance, when love is the most beautiful thing you can experience, having that support from someone else and being able to share your vulnerabilities and heal. And that's something that's very intriguing about the book Wild Monogamy. It talks about how to actually, turn your self-conscious elements or some of your weaknesses into a strength with your partner, and really share things that you are feeling self-conscious about, and then turn them into an erotic experience, which we'll find out more about during our interview, which is incredibly intriguing. It's almost like sexual romantic alchemy. Anyway, the area of romance and love has been probably the least performing area in my life. And a few years ago, I had this thing called the Clever Fox Planner. And they have this wheel that examines several areas of your life, such as your spirituality or your physical life, if you're working out, your health, your friendships, your finance, your work, etc. And also there is one about romance. And I remember every single month I was doing this monthly report, and romance was always really low. And you also have to answer this question, which says, which areas were lacking and why? And I remember when I was, giving all these low scores to romance, it wasn't because I was single. I was actually in a relationship, and the relationship was with an amazing guy. And I'm still so grateful that he was in my life. It was a privilege to have him in my life, but he wasn't the guy. And that kind of held me back a lot. I was so afraid of being alone. And I was also in an almost sexless relationship, and me being a sexpert. So I felt that I was making him suffer, but I was also feeling that I was having this inner internal conflict about my identity. And I'm supposed to be a sexpert, and then I've got this guy who's just really hot for me, and I just don't desire it. And also the kind of sex that he wanted and what I wanted maybe wasn't always the right thing. I was almost more interested in masturbation, which is really sad, because I think sometimes my masturbation practice was a lot more spiritual, and he was, wanting a bit more of a physical connection with me. So that was very, very, very difficult to deal with. Anyway, in this notebook, I came across this list for my ideal man, and I just read it. I wrote this in 2021, and I kind of felt a little bit shocked when I came across it. And I'd written this list after reading the book, Calling in the One. And that book is another amazing book if you are looking for a relationship or looking to do some healing to get ready for a relationship. It's a 49-day course. I think I probably talked about it before on this podcast because I just think it's amazing. And every day you read about 3 pages. They're all on different topics. Each day is a different topic. And there's some short practical exercise to do. So it's really serious. You kind of really examine a lot of your childhood traumas, your relationship traumas, some of your resistance, etc. And you make a list about how you want that person to make you feel. The list is not about he has to be tall, it has to be this, has to be that. It's more about how you're feeling. Anyway, I wrote this list about Mars, and Mars, my Venus and Mars is going to be, the first thing I wrote was, he makes me feel like I've come home. I think that's a really beautiful thing to aspire to in a relationship. Someone that makes you feel like you've met that piece of the jigsaw. You know what I mean? Not that we are missing pieces, because that's very important as well. It's very important to be whole and feel that someone else is adding to you, not filling you, if you see what I mean. I think that's so important, because in the past I think I've had nothing else going on in my life, and the relationships I've had have been the main thing, and they've made me feel empty when I don't have them, and that you shouldn't really have that. But anyway, this feeling like you've come home, this feeling of comfort, stability, and just support, I guess would be what I would describe that as. And also the second point was, he has a flexible schedule. He's in charge of his time. That's really, really important to me, because that's the kind of lifestyle that I have. And I've been with someone who had the complete opposite. And it was so hard to actually make time to see each other. And always time ticking and looking at clocks and in a rush. And I don't really like that. I like to really kind of be chilled with my time. I think time is one of the greatest assets, one of the most valuable asset that we have. And I like to use it in a non-stressful way. And point number 3, which is, I'm surprised it's not earlier on, but we are sexually compatible. This is so important to feel that sexual compatibility, because sexual energy is life force energy. And I know many couples who don't have that, and they're just kind of, I don't know, flatmates. And who would want, for me, it's very, very important to have that passion and desire. Because if not, then what's the point? I mean, I've been in relationships when I've been the one wanting more, or they've been the one wanting more. And it's a very difficult space to be in when that happens. Another point I wrote was, he enjoys conscious living. I definitely describe myself as a conscious living person. So I'm interested in, eating healthily, reading good books, and just conscious living, just enjoying every moment in a conscious way and in a mindful way. And conscious living can refer to many things as well, about sustainability, not being materialistic, because I'm more about, I think I wouldn't describe myself as a materialistic person at all, although I do like some of my comforts, but I'm more about just enjoying every moment. That's more important to me. And then the last but not least is, he's living life on the abundance frequency. Yeah, you don't want to be with someone on the scarcity frequency, always in the lack frame of mind, because I think it's really important about who we spend our time with, because they can definitely influence us. And I've been with people who are more abundant and less abundant than me. It doesn't really make that much difference, because I've never really shared abundance in terms of, I just like that abundance is not just about money, it's a lot more than that. And just feeling that things are limitless is really cool. I was with a friend earlier this week who's definitely not on the abundance frequency. And I remember just, I used to see this person every day at work, And that lack of abundance mentality kind of is like a fearful, the scarcity, and that can influence me. And but I like the abundance mindset makes me think bigger as well. So I do like to kind of bounce off that mentality for sure, and not have limits. And that's my list. Anyway, it was very, very interesting. But going back to the Wild Monogamy book, I read a little extract as well from it on TikTok this week, and it talks about the 4 arenas of I think it was love. Anyway, so or was it sex? I can't remember, but I guess they're kind of similar things. And it talks about there being the physical plane, then the physical arena, the heart, the head, and then the soul. And I think sometimes when you transcend the physical and you have a mental connection or emotional connection, a soul connection with someone, it's much more easy to actually aspire to or enjoy monogamy, because when you get into that space of that person fulfilling something that goes beyond the physical, it's very difficult to replace. I remember when I had my very first relationship, the guy I was with was in my head, he was in my heart, he was in my soul. It was just the most incredible experience I'd ever imagined, and there was just no way I could imagine being with anyone else. Whereas if you're just on the physical plane, then it's just not as satisfactory. But then there's this thing called one-itis, which definitely has a bad reputation. Let me see if I can find a definition for it. I found something on the Urban Dictionary, and one-itis is when you think there's only one person for you, an unhealthy romantic obsession with a single person. I mean, I don't think that's such a bad thing, but I mean, obviously it's saying it's unhealthy here. One thing that Jay Shetty said as well, there's not the perfect person or the perfect relationship, but there's also it's about choosing that person every day. But in general, I definitely I remember having one-itis for the first guy I was ever with. But I don't think it's such a bad thing when you are well, obviously it's bad if you break up with that person and you can't see that there are any more possibilities. But I think it's beautiful to actually just genuinely desire one person. I don't think monogamy should be something that you impose on someone else or someone imposes it on you. I think it should be something that you choose freely. Yeah, so that's all about love. Anyway, we'll be speaking now with Molly and Joe, and they are such an inspirational couple, and I hope you find them as inspirational as I do. Now it's time for this episode's interview. We'll be speaking with Molly Apple and Joe Dunn, authors of Wild Monogamy. Molly and Joe, welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for taking part in this interview today. Could you please introduce yourselves and tell us what you do?
Sure. So, I'm Joe. This is Molly.
Yeah, we've been writing books for about 12 years.
A long time.
Yeah. And after we wrote our first one, The Soulmate Experience, we started doing coaching, typically of singles looking for relationships, but also of couples generally who are in a good relationship and want to make it better. And that's where our newest book, Wild Monogamy, came from.
Oh, that's really interesting about the soulmate experience, because I've been reading this book, thinking about it from a couple's perspective, a couple that's already established. And so what advice can you give for singles looking for soulmates? That's really intriguing. I think I'll read that one next. Do you have anything you can share?
I think one of my biggest tips is when you hear most relationship coaches talk, dating coaches, they always tell you to make a list. This is their...
Okay.
And I've found so many times in coaching people that list turns out to be a list of limitations.
Okay, explain.
And we had those lists going for us.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because you would have had on your list.
I would have had on my list no redheads, believe it or not.
Okay. What's wrong with redheads?
Well, there's nothing wrong with redheads, I've come to find out.
Okay.
In fact, I'm more attracted to them than ever.
Okay.
And I would have had on my list that the guy would have had to have a college education. to interest me.
Okay.
I would have never met him on an app where I ticked a box that said, well, at least 4 years of college.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a brilliant man. He didn't need a college education.
Okay.
It was a waste of time for him.
But I find in my experience, sometimes when you have these lists and then you go for something or do something completely different, it can impact you more because you're kind of going against your own, your own rules kind of thing. Did you find that as well?
Well, I think one of the things is that the things that should be on lists are the things that should be on everybody's lists. You're looking for somebody who's going to support you, who's going to love you, who isn't going to cheat on you, and all of those
Who's a
things.
good person, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Those should just be baseline. That's what we're looking for in a relationship. So it's the things beyond that where I always find that if people bring a little more creativity, creative thinking to those ideas, they can expand the possibilities for themselves.
Okay. Anything else you could want to share before we start getting into the monogamy?
Yes, that's why another reason we wrote Wild Monogamy is because we were finding that so many people were not finding people who were interested in a long-term connection, primarily because of the impending boredom that they were anticipating.
Excellent. So we'll come to that in a moment. When I first came across your content, I was blown away by this glow and union and energy that you both share. And I assumed that you were a new couple. Then I learned you've been together for over 20 years. Is that correct? So tell us, what is your secret about keeping this connection alive?
I think for us, the secret is that we are always exploring how to make a relationship better, right? Whether we're doing it for us or whether we're talking to somebody or a group, it's always in our minds. So it's something that we're living and breathing every day. How do we make this relationship better? And I think that's why it seems like we're in a new relationship. We get that all the time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And also, so obviously you're in a great relationship. So what inspired you to take this great relationship and actually share it with others to actually help them? What was that transition and how did you come to that realization?
I think we'd been in a relationship for about 4 years, I think. And one day we just kind of looked at each other and said, wow, this is amazing, this relationship that we've had. We haven't had a harsh word, no arguments, no nothing. We can either just keep enjoying this or we can try to put all these ideas into a book. And with Molly being a book editor and every editor has a book burning inside them, it was an easy call to make. It was tougher for me because, feeling that imbalance in education, I initially felt like, well, I didn't have that much to contribute. But, once we got into the process, I think we realized that we have a really good synergy in terms of how we approach things and how we write about them.
So I'm assuming this process of writing the book must have been very connecting for you both.
Absolutely.
Would that be true to assume?
Absolutely. I think it takes up most of the time we're together talking about these ideas because they're fascinating when you're talking about a topic like jealousy and how different people could approach it in new ways. I mean, that's an exciting topic. It gets you
kind of charged up. Yeah.
I love it. How long did it take to write the book?
What's that?
How long did it take to write the book and how was the process?
The first book took us 4 years. Right? Yeah.
Wow. The soulmate one.
Right.
Yes.
And were you referring to your own connection? So how did you meet?
Believe it or not, we met on Craigslist.
Oh, wow. Just goes to show you never know. That's amazing.
Which was the perfect venue for us to meet because we didn't exchange pictures. We just launched into this dialogue about relationships that hasn't stopped in 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Wow. And then
really exciting. By the time we met in person, I was in love with him.
So you had a long kind of online exchange before that?
About a month.
We did. And again, that's something that most dating coaches would tell you not to do. They tell you to meet as soon as possible. But for us, it just worked. It was a fascinating conversation. And when we finally met, the moment I saw his face, I'm like, wow, did I hit the jackpot?
Wow, that's amazing. And then you did this soulmate experience book. Is that first? Yeah?
Yeah.
Took 4 years.
And the new one took 7.
Oh my God, that's incredible. So how was that process? Were you just doing a bit every week, or what was it like? Or...
Well, it was pretty constant.
More than a bit every week.
And there are so many topics in there that are so sensitive. And we interviewed dozens and dozens of people and coached people on whatever their issues were and had them try out some ideas and report back. So all of that's a really long process.
Yeah, because what I've seen in some dating coaches that they just focus on their own relationship as being the blueprint for their success. But I think you need to step outside that and look at other couples as well, and look at what's true of relationships in general. I just went to see Jay Shetty in Barcelona on Monday. He was in the theater with his 8 Rules for Love. It was really interesting because he wasn't just, coming from a perspective of, oh, I found the perfect relationship and you can too. It was more about these different statistics and science and all these different statistics about love and breakups, and it was very insightful and a different, taking people's different stories from the audience as well. But I guess you've done that as well. It's not just like focusing on we've got this great relationship, we can share it, but it's a bit more. There's a bit more depth.
I think that the first book was more, what is working for us? How do we, things like we keep expectations to a minimum. That sort of concept is what we shared in the Soulmate Experience. But this new book, so universal idea is that if you can create a safe, accepting space, then you can bring all your stuff into it, your insecurities, your fears, your inhibitions, and you can find ways to work with them. And that's why we interviewed so many people, because we wanted a broad range of what are people feeling insecure about? What are ways they can work with that together to give as many ideas as possible so that people can start thinking creatively about whatever's coming up in their relationship.
So you also coaches then for couples?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Coach couples. Do you coach together?
Mm-hmm. We do.
Generally, you'll take somebody on your own,
yes.
but oftentimes we'll coach together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. That must be really interesting to work together and around this topic, completely, or living and breathing this whole.
Yeah, if you weren't into relationships, you probably wouldn't want to hang out with us for very long.
That's interesting. So when I was reading your book, Wild Monogamy, obviously, first of all, the title really caught my attention. And especially given the fact that, I've been doing this podcast for a couple of years now, and there's a lot more, and I've been a sexual wellness content creator for 14 years. So there's a lot more awareness about, let's say, polyamorous relationships, open relationships. There's a lot of buzz about that. And monogamy is getting a kind of bad rap lately. It maybe seems boring for some. So the title Wild Monogamy seems very alluring. So can monogamy really be wild?
Yes.
If we can find ways to use everything we're coming into the relationship with and everything that comes up in the relationship we all have our own interests. We all have things that turn us on. We might not have ever talked about some of those things. If we can find a way to create a space where we can share those things and find a way to explore them, even in a small way,
it can be really exciting.
We can keep finding new ways to, stretch ourselves together.
Yeah, I would describe myself as a almost commitment phobe, naturally monogamous person, because I think monogamy has to be something that you desire. It's not imposed upon you. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, it's kind of, because I had a very strict Irish Catholic parent. So sometimes some relationships that seem very restricting feels like I'm going back to that time of being 15 and control, like, where are you? Who are you with? Whereas I think it has to come from a place of desire, really, and a mutual desire. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have been in open relationships, and some things worked for me and some things didn't. And I didn't necessarily come into this thinking we're going to be monogamous, but it's just been so fun and so entertaining and so gosh, just keeps opening me up
Mm-hmm.
to feeling better and better about myself, better and better about my sexuality, having more fun together, that, this works.
That's something I do admire from people in the BDSM community or the polyamorous communities, that they have conversations that tend to be a little bit more provocative, or go beyond some limits that most monogamous or vanilla couples are scared to explore. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why we have so many questions for conversation in that book.
Okay.
That starts at the beginning. We have something we call the intimacy inquiry, and warn people, you want to go slowly with this and not just launch right into all of these questions. We had a lot of couples trying these out when we were writing, and two in particular just went headstrong into those questions and started talking about them, and in an hour found themselves in breakdown, and relationship breakdown.
Oh, wow.
They did too fast to be able to hold what was coming up from trying out conversing about these topics that they weren't used to talking about.
I actually did it a couple of weeks ago, and I found it. Can you explain what it is for those who don't know what it is? The
intimacy inquiry?
Yes.
Questions about all kinds of things in a relationship that people are often afraid to talk about, whether that's your insecurities or your sexual history or your desires or your fears.
Or your beliefs about how a particular relationship should look.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or, your history with jealousy, or what makes you jealous.
Mm-hmm.
All of those kinds of conversations. Where are your areas of shame? So it goes very gently into these things, but then it goes very deeply into them. Because if you can share with your partner something that you feel ashamed about, that you've never been able to talk about, then we get to this place where you can start helping each other heal from that. And that's where the real juicy stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's something that I've learned very recently, actually, because years ago, I used to kind of feel that the trauma I was experiencing in relationships was adding to my childhood trauma. It's like I was creating new trauma, new vulnerabilities, and that made me kind of avoid relationships. Whereas I went to this spiritual event once, and they talked about relationships being healing, and I was like, really? It just seemed like such a strange concept for me, because it seemed like you're adding to these, maybe not choosing the right ones, maybe the toxic ones are, but it's a very interesting concept to think of relationships being healing, and then I think it's kind of like an alchemy. We've got something in the back here talking about seeing intimacy issues as perfect opportunities for healing, growth, and pleasure. That's very empowering. You're taking a negative and making it into a positive. Would you like to share anything more about that?
Well, you can imagine if you can help your partner overcome a fear or an inhibition, how grateful they're going to be to you, because they've probably carried it around at least since their last relationship.
For instance, when I was young, my father was obsessed with large breasts.
Oh, I saw that right there.
He talked about them constantly. He made comments constantly. When we watched television, everything was focused on breasts and rating women for how big their breasts were, what meant how important they were, how desirable they were. And small-chested me, I was like, I'm never going to have what it takes to be an attractive, desirable woman. And I carried that idea with me, that my breasts were insufficient for all those years till I met you.
Mm-hmm.
I had never let go of that. And there was an evening when he saw some look on my face and he asked me what was up. And we, established a safety in our relationship where we really could talk about anything. And so I just spilled it all. That I felt insufficient about the size of my breast.
Yeah, and so that prompted me to do a little exercise.
Oh yeah, share, please share. That sounds juicy.
It was a good part of a day, wasn't it? Where I had to show her that her breasts for her were perfect, and so to do that, I photographed her in all different positions, undressed, in the shower. And then we went over these pictures and I showed her what I saw in them
Yeah.
and how, to me, they were perfect.
Yeah.
And
He got me to see them through his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And he also did a lot of tactile, sensual kinds of experiences where close your eyes, stop thinking about how they look, and I just want you to focus on the feeling that's happening here. And he did all kinds of things with implements and water. And, honestly, it is so true that by the end of that evening, I had let go of this idea that I'd carried around for almost 35 years.
yeah,
Wow.
And I never thought about it again.
whether it's with me or whether we go to a clothing optional spa,
Doesn't matter.
She's totally fine.
I never thought about it again. I never had this idea that my breast should be bigger. Like, I see the perfection. He got me to see that.
So were you closed off in terms of the pleasure in that area before then?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So what are the rewards and benefits of a monogamous relationship in your opinion and experience?
Well, I think one thing, and it doesn't have to be monogamous to do this, but we really have this opportunity to create this safe container where we can be anything. We can show up as anything. We can share anything that's going on with us, anything that we've had trouble with. And I don't know that it would be harder in a multi-person relationship, but there's something about this dynamic that just makes that really easier for me.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we imagine having other relationships and we think, wow, it would take so much, right? To do so much time and energy to do them justice, right? Because we would want to do other relationships like we did our own.
Yeah.
And so we keep coming back to the fact that, no, this is what works for us. We're super happy doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that we, one of the last chapter in that book called Monogamy with Benefits, we're not afraid of having experiences around or with other people. It's just not something we're going after, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that drawn to it.
So we do share a few experiences we've had that are very mild, but absolutely have added so much to our relationship that we can have those experiences.
For me, it seems like more a safe space, more sacred. I think that's my kind of.
That's a good.
I like to kind of create a cocoon, And when you only desire that one person, they give you so much, especially when it's like you talked about. I made a TikTok earlier. I just read a little bit out of your book about the 4 dimensions, 4 arenas of sexuality. Like when someone's getting into your headspace, or it's transcending the physical. It's very difficult to replace that connection. When someone's in your heart or in your head. Physical. It's kind of it's a much more shallow plane in general.
I did have this experience when I was in a long-term relationship, and we were monogamous for a good period of time, a number of years. And when we decided to open it up, the minute I had an experience with someone else, this is just my own experience and what happened to me, I felt myself disconnecting from my primary partner in a way that never came back. I could feel it happening, like, oh, my interest is so much over here now. I am so intrigued with this. This will take a lot of work to keep this connection strong, but it never had the strength that it had before. I mean, that's just how I operate, that all my attention wanted to be over here because this was so exciting and this was so new. So, yeah.
Wow. I think my way of resolving that would be, I've done in the past is role play, just becoming someone else. Have you experimented with that? Because that can be very exciting, like doing different roles, different names, different person, but you're still the same people, but, exploring different characteristics and personalities.
We've actually done that quite a bit. About the time of the Mars.
Yeah.
When we pretended that, I was hired for the evening.
Oh, cool.
And we had this conversation knowing that other people could hear us around there.
It was hilarious. The couple next to us was just so intrigued with, oh my God, this woman hired this guy for the evening. And it just made us go on and on and on.
You could see them leaning, to hear better what we're talking about.
And it just stirred us up. We just went wild with that. I asked him about his previous encounters, and he asked me about, previous service providers I'd hired. And we just went on and on for so long that night.
And it got us all hot. And I think we went right back home and had sex.
I remember watching a film years ago. I just didn't see the whole thing, but I just remember seeing a snippet of this film where there was a woman in a stark, smoky bar, sitting at the bar, and all the guys were leering at her. And there's one guy in the corner looking a bit more, and he came over and bought her a drink. The next scene, you see them having sex somewhere in a car. And then they go home and pay the babysitter. I just thought that was so cool. You're going to go out and be strangers, I guess it's similar to what you just described there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're doing it in public, it has an extra and different names, different clothes, or whatever have you.
It's exciting.
Yeah, we have done different names. Just on the spur of the moment, we were talking to a guy in a bar again, and I just told him that I'd been a stripper in Florida, and I put myself through college as a stripper, and he was so fascinated, and I just had to keep making up more stuff about my story. It was hilarious. It's so fun. And, I suppose people could think, well, you're doing this terrible thing, you're lying to this guy, but he was quite entertained, and we were.
Oh, yeah. So, what was the harm?
Yeah.
Amazing. Let me see what else I can find here in my list of questions. So one chapter that really intrigued me was the one about the healing power of eroticism. We've just talked about how relationships can be healing, but what about erotica? How can we use eroticism to heal?
So eroticism is, basically inspiring sexual desire. And that's exactly what he did when he was working with me around my breasts, right? Mm-hmm. He made that such an erotic experience. And that concept we've taken to so many couples when somebody has an issue. This is a great example. If they have an issue with a body part, mm-hmm. My stomach or my butt or something is not right. And if their partner loves them and loves that part of them, or it anyway wants them to feel good about it, there's so many things they can do, making love to that part, finding ways to get them to see it, as Joe did, get them to see it through their eyes. Like, let go of your conception of it for a moment and listen to my truth as I describe how sexy it is to look at your ass. That sort of thing. Making it erotic, this part of you that you've rejected, and getting you to feel that desire and getting it, however they can do it. And that's why we give so many examples in there, because there's so many different ways this could be approached, to be able to get them to feel your desire for them through that body part.
Amazing. And what advice would you give to a couple who have lost the spark? Is it possible to get it back? I guess you must have many of your clients must have that issue, and that's why they come to you, I would assume. Is that correct?
We find that we like working with people who still like each other. I think when you get to a place where there's a relationship's in breakdown and there are so many issues, I find that, I'm not a therapist. We're not therapists. That's a more difficult situation. But if they still like each other,
then we can help them.
Then there are ways.
Especially if they both want to improve their relationship. They both recognize that, hey, something it's kind of slipped away, that connection.
Which is really...
How do you get it back?
Right. It's so common because we just get into our routines and do our things and day after day. So we've got to try something different. We've got to find the edges of our comfort zones and play there. And that's one of the things that we take couples through in our book, is how to find where your comfort zones are. And that's one of the reasons that we want them to have all those conversations, because one of them will be comfortable with these ideas, these things you could do sexually. One of them will be comfortable with these. And we want to find the place where they could stretch a little bit together and play. We call it playing at the edges of your erotic comfort zones,
You read that at the beginning. Well, why is that so important, do you think, taking it to limits?
When we're newly with someone, it's all an exploration. It's all
exciting.
Yeah,
it's all on the edge, right? Because you don't know what's coming next.
Because you haven't ever done that before.
Right.
But when we've done it 1,000 times the same way, of course we're bored.
And that edge is a little bit farther out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. So what's your what about a sexless relationship? What would your number one tip to be to get that intimacy back? Because I guess that happens to a lot of people.
It does. And again, I think it depends on the quality of the relationship for us. To be able to have suggestions is, are they both wanting to get that back? Because if both of them aren't, that's really tough.
Yeah.
And
even one of them doesn't want to.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So often it seems that the best thing is a change in the structure of the relationship, and that it's not going to, there is no fix for that that's going to get them back to where they were. So it sounds like kind of a downer, but I think that's so often the case when one person is just no longer interested.
Yeah.
And the person's struggling to get them interested. And it's like, one of the things you have to look at is the possibility that that's not possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really hard situation there, sexual incompatibility, that rejection. And also from the other side, the frustration, it's very, very hard.
And it's so common, right? As we get older, and libido diminishes for one person quicker than another, and so it's a challenge that a lot of people are going to face.
Is there anything you can share about aging libidos to keep it? Because obviously, how we have sex changes over time, and you can't just do the same thing as you were when you were 18. I mean, it all changes. So, and do you have any tips about that?
Right. Yeah. One of the stories that's so moving to me, even now reading about, is a couple that met, and he was physically unable to get an erection because of medical issues. And she had, her vagina had gotten to the point where she couldn't actually have penetration. So here's this couple who thought when they first got together, well, what can we do? There's nothing we can do because sex means penis and vagina. And they started to just say, no, we're going to find new ways. And their exploration together, which was so lovely that they wrote a whole piece for us that we included in the book of, wow, these two people have an incredible sexual connection, an incredible sex life that goes way beyond anything either of them had experienced when they had fully operational body parts. And so inspiring to me that as time goes on, we just have to keep exploring and forget these ideas of what sex is, these very limited ideas of that sex equals the things we've given names to, these sex acts we've given names to, and that's it.
Another thing that can kill the passion is actually living with someone and getting all those domestic chores day to day. And do you have any tips about how to make those things sexy?
Yeah, do them naked.
Okay. Because I was on a TV thing recently here in Spain, and there was a woman, I think she's in her 70s, and she's very happily married because there was a panel of all different people of different ages and different relationship statuses. And this woman was saying that, they sleep naked. That was one of the tips. And whenever, she's chopping the vegetables, there's always kissing. With her husband, they've been together, since she was in her 20s. Wow. I guess so. Yeah, doing
this idea of being intentional about it and thinking about it and making an effort to notice. One of the things that I love to do is when I see him doing domestic chores, I take pictures of things I like. When he bends over a lot cleaning things. It's just something he's
with an apron, with a naked with an apron.
And I take pictures of it to remind myself, this is my really good looking partner. He's in this great position scrubbing the floor right now, and his ass looks amazing. And I post those pictures with captions. It's one of the ways that I keep my eyes open to his attractiveness. I don't let myself not see it.
Okay. That's amazing. So what about in the jealousy? I was intrigued about you talk about rational versus irrational jealousy. Could you explain the difference and how to deal with both?
So most people that we talk to who are feeling jealous are having what we call irrational jealousy, which is jealousy brought on by mostly the thoughts they're thinking about a situation, not something that's actually happening. Like, oh, my boyfriend's paying attention to that attractive woman over there, and that's causing. It's not that's causing me jealousy. It's my insecurity and the things that I'm telling myself about what that means that are causing my jealousy. So that's what we call irrational jealousy. There's really not anything physically happening to be worried about. Rational jealousy is more when, your partner comes home and says they've cheated on you, right? And I will feel all kinds of things that I might call jealousy, but it's, you've just been, you can feel insecure, you can feel afraid of what this means for the future and all of that stuff. That's more of a rational experience. And so where the work is to be done is with that irrational jealousy, which is generally around this fear of loss, these insecurities we have, these ideas we've been fed by our culture that I should be the one and only person you're ever attracted to.
If not, you should be jealous. Right?
Yeah, I guess the irrational is kind of when someone's overstepped those boundaries, gone against those agreements.
Right. Yeah. Right. And
and that can be a little tougher to deal with, right? All that underlying stuff. How did this happen? What wasn't going on in a relationship? So yeah, the irrational jealousy is
it's something that you can work with.
Yeah.
It's something that you can get better at. And it's something that if you've got a great relationship, that your partner can actually even help you.
Okay, so you hinted earlier about how it can be a good thing or could be a kind of juicy thing. So could you expand now on that?
Right. So if I have, let's say that I have a fear that Joe's interested in women with large breasts. Let's say that's still playing around in my mind. It's not. But when we go to a party, I'm going to pick out all the women with large breasts and be monitoring him to make sure he's not watching them or looking down their chest. And if I can talk to him about it and say, I have this insecurity, and could you help me with this?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all she has to do, right? Is tell me what she's thinking and I'll work with her on it.
So how would you work with me at a party if I had told you that?
Well, I would probably tell you that I'm going to look at all women, whatever the size of their breasts, and why don't you stand over here with me and we'll do it together, right? So that you can see it's not there's no threat. It's just me as a guy looking around, finding attractive people and acknowledging that to myself even, or to her, So yeah, there's always ways to work with jealousy. You going to tell a story about how...
Well, I've worked with it so much in my life that it's very hard for me to feel jealous. So I actually go out, go do something for me to feel jealous.
Go flirt with somebody.
Yeah.
She's always asking me when I come back from the pool, well, did you flirt with anybody today? Wanting to hear it.
I do.
Wanting to hear that, feel that little bit of jealousy.
Yeah, it takes quite a bit. Yeah. So if we're out and he strikes up a conversation with someone who's attractive, I love that.
Really? Explain. That's very intriguing.
Yes. So there was a time when he went up to order us drinks, and a woman came up to him and started talking to him, and it was obvious to me she was, wanting to see if he was single. And instead of, I know some people would rush up to protect their interests in that situation, but I actually walked a ways behind her so that I could look at him from the perspective she was seeing him from. So I'm looking over her shoulder at him going, yeah, he looks cute. If I just saw him in a bar and I hadn't met him and I was interested in finding someone to go hang out with, yeah.
You want to go home with.
Too. Yeah, he's cute. And I want that conversation to go on and keep going. I want to get that feeling.
That just enough jealousy.
Just enough jealousy.
Well, why? Why do you get off on it, or what's the?
It's exciting.
The risk.
Logically, there's no difference between the feeling that comes up with jealousy and the feeling of excitement, right?
Okay.
The heart's racing, the blood pressure goes up, There is no difference physiologically. So I can feel those feelings and interpret it as passion and desire for him.
Okay. Interesting. So when did you release Wild Monogamy? When did it come out? Is it new?
A month ago?
Yeah.
About a month
Okay,
ago.
it's super new. Okay, amazing. And are you thinking about the next book already?
We are going to do a revision of our first book, The Soulmate Experience.
Okay.
About 12 years, and there's a lot that we've learned because we've been together for 12 more years and we've coached a lot of people, and it could use some updating. So
Refreshing.
it's still very popular. It sells very well, and I really want to put new material in there to be more helpful.
Absolutely, because I mean, things have changed so much in the last 10 or 15 years even. I mean, with apps, dating apps, and it's changed so much. I mean, it used to be, I've never done a dating app ever because I've just been too afraid of the location thing. 'Cause I used to be quite well known here in Barcelona on the local radio and stuff. I didn't want to have my picture within 500 meters. You know what I mean? That whole thing just made me feel a bit not so good. And also it's very reductive, just picture, age, and, a sentence.
Nice.
But then there's new apps. There's like Hinge, which is a bit more depth, and there's Bumble. There's just all these different apps all of a sudden. And I think the way we meet people has just changed so much. People are not relying on just going to a bar or a club on a Saturday night. It's just more diverse, I suppose. There's a lot to think about there.
Yeah.
And then with COVID, that brought on even more challenges in terms of meeting people in person.
Yeah. There are some apps where you don't have to put photographs of your face, which I quite like because, again, we met on Craigslist where you didn't need it.
Yeah.
Pictures of your face. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate not having to fill out boxes of all of these
Expectations.
ways of defining yourself and what you want. I remember when I first went on Craigslist and searching the posts, that I liked that I didn't know what I wanted.
Yeah.
And that this was
So what grabbed your attention from his ad then? So I'm assuming that, Joe, you put the ad and then she responded. Is that correct?
Yep.
What was it about the ad? Let's share.
The subject line was, "Yes, I'm married, but I'd like what my wife has."
Which is?
Affairs.
she was
Okay.
We was having affairs,
like
and
not agreed upon affair.
no, and it was a sticking point for much of our relationship. And there was a point in time when I finally succumbed, I guess you could say, to like, okay, this is who she is. And I stood back and I looked at, okay, what is she getting out of this? And I could understand, the things she were getting. We'd been married for a number of years, and we had kids, and it probably wasn't that exciting. And, so she's looking for some excitement. And I thought, yeah, I get it. I've been in the same relationship with this lack of excitement. And so rather than make my wife wrong again, I basically said, okay, you can have this. I get it. And I also want to experience this.
And he put out a post and I met him.
Okay, so what was it about that post that intrigued you then?
I loved two things. One, I loved that it was so positive. He was just so honest in this post. He seemed such a sweetheart to be so honest about what was going on with him and what he'd tried to do in that situation to make things better. And also the idea of being with someone who'd been with a cheating partner for well over a decade, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And being the person I am, which is, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do, something that I told you I wouldn't do, I couldn't do. So I knew I was a really safe person for him. And I just thought, this is going to be a lot of fun.
I was like a virgin with her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why we started talking about relationships because of the content of his post. And
Okay. So about your limits and boundaries came from that, about monogamy, I suppose. Is that correct?
It wasn't explicit,
Right.
but it was definitely in my nature to hold a really safe place for him where he would just know that was never going to happen here.
Wow. There's a lot of healing there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. So then you kind of got separated, divorced, and then you kind of got together. Is that what happened then?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. 20 years ago. 20.
Oh, it was a beautiful story. So a couple of quick questions for you. What is the book that changed your life apart from your own?
Do you have mine?
No, it's probably the relationship course I took as opposed to a book.
Yeah.
I took a very intensive relationship course trying to make things work with my wife. And that was a relationship that was too far gone by that point. But there were so many great things that I learned about relationships in that course that when we met, it was like the communication just flowed so well because she was right on the same page as I was. And I think that really helped us to start this relationship as, we found so much common ground.
How about you, Molly? What was the book?
I would have to say The Power of Now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've not read that yet, but it's on my list. It's
Yeah. I've read it many times, and I will pick it up at any time and read a sentence and just carry the sentence with me through the day. And it just makes me feel so calm and connected to the world. It's just beautiful. It's just poetry.
amazing. I might have to buy that. Yeah. So which phrase, affirmation, or quote do you live by?
Well, I wish I had time to think of this because there are so many.
Yeah.
One is from your relationship teacher.
Which
It's
one?
all working.
Oh, yeah.
What's that? Sorry.
It just that it's all working.
Okay.
That this is just where it's supposed to be. It's moving in the direction it's supposed to go. And
That's very centering.
yeah.
Yeah. Because there's so many that I use, I can't think of one on the spot.
What about a phrase that defines your relationship or a philosophy? How would you do
Yeah,
a sentence?
I would have to say that it's staying in a place of gratitude, and that's we get to have this time together each day. It's not something I have to force the gratitude. I just have to tune my attention for a moment to go, this is really special that we have this connection. And just thinking that makes my heart open.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Sweet.
Amazing. So where can people find you?
Molly and Joe, Mali and Joe, we're on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and mollyandjoe.com. We have some free books you can download there.
You have more free books. What do you have? What do you have to download on your website?
3 ebooks
Okay.
that are all about relationships.
Okay.
Having better.
And what are the titles of those books?
Gosh, what are the titles? Again, I'm coming up blank.
Are they for people who have relationships and to improve them, or what's
Either way,
okay.
it always starts with yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And everything, even Wild Monogamy is a great book for single people because it really helps you think about what I want and what's possible in a relationship.
Definitely sets the stage.
Yeah. So a crash course in love, sex, and intimacy. That's one of the ones we have on there.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good ebook. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today on the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast. It's been a real pleasure and a huge inspiration speaking to you both.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. It's been great.
The book I'm reading now is Venus in Furs by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. I'm sure I haven't pronounced the author's name correctly there, but please forgive me. And this book was the inspiration of the word masochism, and it tells a story of Severin and Venus, and also the song Venus in Furs by Velvet Underground talks about this as well. It's based on this. It's kind of loosely based on a true story as well. So Severin, he calls himself a suprasensual, I think, something like that. And he meets this rich young widow who wears furs, and she's a redhead, and she's very cruel. And he kind of she's his muse. And the reason why I love this book so much is that it really awakened my sapiosexuality. And sapiosexuality is about being attracted to intellect. And this is like going back to what I mentioned earlier about those 4 arenas of love or sex or attraction that Molly and Joe talked about. You know, you've got the physical, which is probably the easiest, most accessible one. Then you've got the heart, the mind, and the soul. And I think when you're in someone's head, it's very, it's a unique experience. And that's something that really attracted me to the world of fetishism and BDSM at the beginning, because it wasn't just about a physical thing, it was a mental connection. And my form of living BDSM, which I don't practice now, was always very intellectual. It was very, like, for example, lots of mind games, lots of role plays, lots of wit and mental provocations. And this book really planted that seed for me. And it was given to me by my first ever boyfriend, who was also a sapiosexual. It took me to very, how would I say? He took me to the edge, and it ended in a very, very bad way. And I have no idea what he's doing now, but he's completely out of my life, and he's completely gone. But the seeds he planted in me lasted a lifetime. And this book, I kind of it really struck a chord with me, because I wanted him to kind of think of me the way Severin thought of Venus in this book. This pure adoration, this power that she had, because I was, going from virginity, trying to become a dominatrix kind of thing, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I felt very lost, and I wasn't as sure of myself as I might be today, which is obviously very normal when you are starting out in your sexual discovery. Another thing I loved about this book, that it wasn't about sex. It wasn't about the penis and vagina sex. There was no touching. There was no nudity. There's a part of the book when quite later on she comes out of her bath or something, and then you realize that, wow, that's the first time he sees her naked. There's a lot of mind games and lots of whipping in it as well, which is definitely not my thing, but the whip is a very strong symbol of the book. The punishments that Severin receives from Venus. And she deprives him of a lot of things as well. There's a time when he's her slave for a while, and he can't see her, but he can hear her. Also, they go on a train journey, and she goes first class, he goes third class. It's a lot of these different things which might not seem erotic to most people, but I just love the mind games that are played out between the characters. I want to read a small extract of when they actually meet. Let me just clear my throat. We have to get this down right, because this is like a very special book for me. And also I was thinking, wow, I look like her. I am her. I need to be her. Anyway, here we go. There is a soft rustling in the twigs and blades, and the pages of my book rustle on the terrace. Likewise, there is a rustling. A woman's dress. She is there, Venus, but without furs. No, this time it is merely the widow, and yet Venus. Oh, what a woman! As she stands there in her light white morning gown, looking at me, her slight figure seems full of poetry and grace. She is neither large nor small. Her head is alluring, piquant, in the sense of the period of the French marquise, rather than formally beautiful. What enchantment and softness! What roguish charm play about her none too small mouth! Her skin is so infinitely delicate that the blue veins show through everywhere, even through the muslin covering her arms and bosom. How abundant her red hair! It is red, not blonde or golden yellow. How diabolically and yet tenderly it plays around her neck. Now her eyes meet mine like green lightning. They are green, these eyes of hers, whose power is so indescribable, green. But as are precious stones, or deep, unfathomable mountain lakes. She observes my confusion, which has even made me discourteous, for I have remained seated and still have my cap on my head. She smiles roguishly. Finally, I rise and bow to her. She comes closer and bursts out into loud, almost childlike laughter. I stammer, as only a little dilettante or great big donkey can do on such an occasion. Thus our acquaintance began. The divinity asks for my name and mentions her own. Her name is Wanda von Donaju, and she is actually my Venus. Wow, I love it. Yes, I just love that book so much. And yeah, this is definitely something I recommend. It's also a very short book, but very full of adventure. There is so much happening in this book. I also have the book that's written from the woman who inspired the Venus story, and I haven't read it yet, actually. It's called Confession de ma vie. It's in French, and I bought it on Amazon a while ago. I must get round to writing that, because there's always a story behind a book, and it's not always as erotic or as light-hearted. But anyway, that's Venus in Furs. And if you're interested in, the history of sexuality and where the word masochism comes from, and especially sapiosexuality, this is the book. Venus in Furs by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. Now it's time to slow things down as we prepare for this episode's guided affirmations meditation. It's probably not a good idea to listen to this while driving or operating machinery. Instead, take a break from whatever you're doing, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and enjoy. I am ready for love. I am love. I radiate love and positivity. I choose love over fear. Love is abundant in my life. Love surrounds me. I am worthy of love. I am ready for love. I am love. I am deserving of love and affection. Love flows effortlessly into my life. I am capable of giving and receiving love in abundance. I am deserving of love. My heart is open to love. I am worthy of love. I am ready for love. I am love. I am open and ready to receive a deep and fulfilling love. I attract loving relationships. Love flows through me. I am worthy of love. I am ready for love. I am love. I am worthy of a healthy and supportive partnership. I am grateful for the love that exists in my life. Love is my guiding force. Love surrounds me, and I am surrounded by love. choose to love myself unconditionally. I am worthy of love. To find out more about me and my orgasmic lifestyle, visit venusohara.org or follow me on Instagram at instagram.com/venusohara. Make sure to search for the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, have an orgasmic week, and make sure every day is a climax.